Welcome to the Fearless Females Voice podcast, where women's stories and experiences are shared in order to empower and inspire others. Before we begin the podcast, I wanted to let you know that there's a free Becoming Fearless test on my website, which will take less than 5 minutes to complete. This test will show you how fearless you are and give you some great tips and techniques at the end. You can check it out on www.fearlessfemales.me. On this episode, I am joined by Ruby Bennett, who is a creative artist with a background in architecture. Ruby has always been a high performer from when she studied to her career and now through to her new business. She studied architecture and worked her way up only to find there was a bit of a conflict with building a career and also thinking about motherhood. This caused some challenges which led to some mental health struggles. Ruby talks to us about her artwork, her inspiration, her transition from the working world into being an artist, her mental health journey, along with her new project which she's working on. It was so lovely speaking to Ruby and hearing more of her story, which I know so many of you will relate to. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. So Ruby, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And what does being a fearless female mean to you?
So I would say a fearless female is essentially showing some sort of strength, whether this is excelling in a career or pursuing a passion, or perhaps having overcome a struggle in your life. And essentially, I think all women are fearless females because everyone goes through all these aspects. There's no such thing as a female that isn't fearless. It's just working out what you're afraid of and pushing those limits and finding the strength that allows you to push those limits.
I love that. That's so true. And I love that you said that all women are fearless, because I tend to find that when I ask women about being fearless, they always say, oh, well, I don't really see myself as fearless. And then they tell me their story of what they've been doing. And I'm thinking, God, you are so fearless. Like you are owning it. Like that's incredible. Like for me, it's just like, wow, they're doing so well. And it's that inner confidence that allows you to be like, you know what, I'm doing well. Like it's okay. And it's okay to think that. It's good. It's good to,
And being fearless can be found in many different scales. So I'm quite a shy and introverted person. So just even doing this podcast for me is trying to find that fearless female inside me to be able to do this podcast. And this is quite a small scale aspect of my life and all the other struggles you face, but we all interact with these elements throughout our day.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? When I did my first podcast, I was so scared. I was just like, I don't even starting this. I was like, I don't even know what to do. And I had to get my friend on my first one to be like, right, let me just speak to someone I'm comfortable speaking to. So that was my story. So it was kind of ease into it, right? So, and once you do more and more, then you get better and better and feel more confident with it. So it's just taking that first step. So I'm so glad that you're here joining me today.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's fun.
So Ruby, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
So I am an architect and an artist. I like to think of myself as both, but I studied architecture. I did my undergrad as a Bachelor of Science at Bath, so I got a very structured ground into the profession, and then moved on to Masters of Architecture at Westminster, where it was much more of an art-based course, and I'm fully qualified. And when I actually went very successfully through my studies. When I finished my master's, I was chosen as one of the top 10 students in the country, future architects in the country. And
wow.
My project was chosen as one of the top 50 projects and showcased in the Blueprint magazine. I was asked to return as well as a tutor for that unit. And I also then got some of my artwork at the time in the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition. So quite an eclectic range of activities in the arts industry, a mix of architecture, a mix of artwork as well in tandem.
What is it that drew you to architecture and artwork?
Well, I always loved maths and science and art at school. So it just felt like architecture was probably the best subject that combined all my interests. And I loved architecture. I loved looking at the environment around us and how different spaces cause you to interact differently, and whether you can actually design health into the environment that surrounds you. And in regards to the art side, so the more painting and craft elements that I love to do, I've come from a very creative family. I grew up in London's first applied open house because my mum is an exhibition designer. So she works with a lot of artists, and a lot of their work was actually domestic furniture, but done in quite a quirky manner. And so our house actually showcased these elements, and people could come and view them so that they got an idea that art can be part of our day-to-day life. And so it's always been integrated into my family. My brother's a graphic designer in Japan. So it's hard to actually say when I started to become interested in art and painting, because it's always been there.
Yeah, it sounds like you're right. It has been integrated into your family, and you've got a little bit of a creative flair going on with your family as well. No, it's good. So when you completed your studies, what did you move on to then doing? Did you go into being an architect?
I went straight into being an architect. And I always did paintings on the side. I always took on commissions or produced artwork for friends and family as gifts, but I went into the very structured route of an architect's profession. So I qualified with my part 3, worked in some really well-known, beautiful practices, but the day-to-day tasks of architecture are quite structured. They're very repetitive. There's an element of precision that's required. But although it produces very incredibly joyful outcomes, it does come from a very structured environment. And I needed my artwork in the side to have that playfulness and that freeness that the colorful artworks that I produced allowed me.
I get that. It's nice to have a balance, isn't it? Especially when you have a flair or interest or a passion in something like art. Because for me, it sounds very creative. It's expression. Do you agree?
Yeah, completely. Art's so subjective that it's hard to, you can't ever be right or wrong in it.
Yeah.
And I think I liked that aspect. I like the way I paint, so therefore it's correct. And there are other people in the world that will like it, and there are people that would dislike it. But it's also very hard in tandem with that, is because art's so personal, it still feels strange when someone doesn't like your artwork. So it's like you're giving over a part of yourself in this playfulness, and it's finding that balance to be able to accept the criticism that comes with the art industry as well.
Have you ever had that? The criticism?
Have I had that? Not really. I've had older generations, so more grandparents in my life, say they don't understand what I do. And I think that's a polite way of saying we don't particularly like the style, we wouldn't put it on our walls. But then it's only really that sort of generation. Everyone else gives very positive feedback and they seem to love it, and I love it. So I just keep pushing forward.
Good. I think that's the key thing, isn't it? You believe in your artwork, you like your artwork as well. And that's the key thing, because I feel like with art, we were talking about this the other day, that it is very subjective and it's just dependent on the person and what they like. But what I see as art may not necessarily, like what I like in, for example, art galleries or exhibitions may not be the artwork that I want in my, I don't know, study, or the artwork in my bedroom would be different to my living room. So it's very much kind of just dependent, I guess, on the vibe or the feel. So do you get many people kind of connecting with your artwork through you?
100%, because I very much like to chat to clients. The initial interaction comes from them seeing my artwork somewhere, loving it, and wanting a commission and wanting a piece for themselves. But I then like to get to know my clients, talk to them about their favorite colors, different subjects they like, and if it's a portrait, get to know the person that the portrait's of a little better. If it's an animal, why this animal, what do you like it fearsome? Do you like it comical? Because I want to produce art that people love. I want my clients to take enjoyment from the result and essentially love that this is on their wall in their home.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to interact, you have to get personal. And there are some clients that have come back for 6, 7 extra commissions since. We email regularly. I feel like I've got friends all over the world now in different ways. So it's really nice. I love that aspect of art commissions.
Yeah, it sounds so nice that you get to connect with the clients and really hone in on what they want and deliver that. Because artwork, I feel, stays with you for life. It's not like you just have it in one flat and then don't take it to the next. Like, it's going to move around with you because people form connections with the artwork. So we went to some of our friends' houses yesterday for dinner, and they have a lot of different types of artwork around the house. And they asked us, what does this artwork represent to you? We all had very different answers, but they had a strong connection to each piece. So just visually looking at it, they had a story or a connection to the colors or what it means to them in terms of the visual. How do you find your inspiration for your paintings?
That has always been the hardest question to answer because I actually have no idea in a lot of ways. So it has to be from the things around me. I love color combinations. So I love playing with different colors together. I love animals and wildlife. Sometimes I think if I hadn't gone into architecture, I'd probably have gone down a route that worked with animals and helped animals in some manner. So this type of artwork brings through all my interests that it's very hard to say where the inspiration comes from.
Yeah, because a lot of your pieces, I've seen them, they're very, very beautiful. So I'll put a link for the listeners to have a look at them. They're very bold, they're creative, they're colorful. And this is the kind of style that I see with your pieces, whether they're a portrait or of an animal or, you know, whatever it is. So that's kind of the style that you're known for, would you say?
It is more so now. I think when it comes to the more handmade elements that I do for special events, for weddings and things like that, it tends to be much more geometrical and it plays more to the architecture side of my brain. And then the paintings at the moment are, as you say, very bright, very colorful. They initially started because I thought the series would be stimulating for children's nurseries, and I've actually found that in ways they're slightly too stimulating, where some people have got back to me and said, I actually can't get my baby to go to sleep because he loves just staring at the artwork so much that you can't take his eyes off it. And so I think that's a positive, but I'm hoping that's a positive at least.
Yeah, of course it is. It's nice that they're attractive, aren't they? So at least that the clients are enjoying it, their families are enjoying it. It's nice that the baby looks at it for long periods of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, but maybe the parents would like some breaks.
Take them to another room. It's fine. And then you mentioned that you studied architecture and you went into working as an architect, and now you do more painting, so you're more of an artist. What was the transition like from working full-time in architecture to then going into being an artist?
So I probably can't fully explain the transition without giving a little bit more background information into the history of my mental health, essentially. So many females within profession will get to a point where their body clock is essentially saying, perhaps this is now the time you should start thinking of having a family. And for myself, that seemed to happen precisely at the same time when male colleagues were actually advising me, you need to dedicate more time to the project, you need to be in the office more for your career to progress. And the two in tandem just sort of brought me to a standstill. It stopped me in my tracks. And at the time, I was feeling very capable. I was running consultant meetings, going to client meetings, managing the team. I had a very strong female mentor at work that I loved working for. And I was trying to balance these two very specific desires, but they started to tip in the wrong direction for me. And I perhaps addressed this aspect too late, and I just stopped. I couldn't stop crying. I couldn't get out of bed. I avoided seeing friends and family as much as I could. And you know me a bit better than the listeners do. I love exercising. I love going to the gym. I stopped all exercise. The idea of going into a gym just filled me with panic. And I was diagnosed with severe anxiety and depression. And that was about 2 years ago now. And everything just sort of stopped, and I was feeling this intense guilt that I needed to be at work. I needed to show that I was this strong, career-driven woman, but I couldn't find it in me at the time anymore. And then the pandemic started, and we all went into lockdown, and the architecture industry just came to a complete standstill. Clients put projects on pause so that they could analyze the situation. Loads of us went onto furlough, and it gave me a bit more time to breathe. And this anxiety fog started to clear slightly, and I had more clarity to analyze essentially my emotions and articulate a little better what I was lacking and what I needed. And the main thing was this creative aspect. I needed to paint. I needed to make objects more often. And I'd been doing them in tandem with my architecture career, but I needed them to be more in my life, in the balance.
How did you find that out? That's a really good realization that you've just made about yourself. Is very, very self-aware on that. But how did you actually figure that out?
I think because when the anxiety hit, I stopped painting completely.
Okay.
I couldn't, as you say, where do you take your inspiration from? Nothing was inspiring me. It used to be a stress relief for me, but I couldn't do it at all. I didn't paint in any medium. I didn't make things. And then when the fog started to clear, when I was on furlough and we were in lockdown, I took on so many new commissions. I started painting in new mediums and teaching myself how to use watercolors more, because I've always been a very acrylic-based artist, but I started using different methods and loving it and enjoying it and liking what I was producing. So it showed me that the thing that I'd always known was my stress release actually needed to be much more dominant in my life as well.
And it's good that you pursued that, because that's almost you then finding your passion and just living it every single day.
Completely. And I guess to a degree with the situation, I had a little bit of the luxury that I was on furlough, that I could take the time to paint and see if people wanted my artwork on jigsaws or in card forms and things. And as you and I have been discussing lately, look into markets as well, and the idea of how it would work to sell my artwork and set up a business creating bespoke items for weddings as well. So I had that time suddenly to be able to check how to get this balance.
Yeah. And it's interesting what you said about how you were feeling whilst you were at work, or whilst you were trying to progress your career and push through and build your career, because a lot of women are in that same position of thinking, right, I want to settle down and have a family, but also, okay, I want to now just be a leader in my field or progress in my career. And it's interesting the amount of people who say they don't mix. So it's almost like you have one or the other. And in my previous roles, there's been mixed reviews on that. So some women have told me, yep, you can, have your child, but then it will hold you back here. Or then I've had, actually, it's okay if you have your child, then you can ease back into it and go, you can still progress. And it's just a really interesting topic, I find, because you're right. The body clock is against us, essentially, right? For women, as women, We're
It
kind
seems
of,
to hit at the exact same time period where you can progress the most in your profession. You've trained, you're skilled in this area now, and this is where you can really push your career. But bam, that's when it hits. Suddenly you feel this need to start a family.
but what was going on in your head? Did you think that both the two in line in parallel weren't possible? Like you couldn't have a family and then still yet progress? Is that what you were being told? Like what was the situation?
I think with many professions, this isn't unique to architecture, but with many professions, there is this sort of unwritten society plan where you work longer hours, you give a lot to your career, and I just don't think you can do both in tandem. I think something is going to suffer, whether it's temporary, like your colleagues were saying, where you have to take some time off, you have to do the family, and then you can go back to it, or whether it's long term. Something is going to have to take a hit slightly. And so I don't think it's easy to do both in tandem and excel at both.
And is that where your fear and anxiety was at, in the fact that it's going to be difficult to do both? Because I really want to push through and work on my career, but I also want the family.
Well, I think I'd done a course that was 7 years. I've always got top grades in school and in university, and I didn't want to just live in my career. I wanted to push in it. I wanted to take on more responsibility. I wanted to be great at my career in architecture. But I am best friends with my mum. I think my mum's incredible in every way. And I wanted that same relationship with my kids when we started to have kids. And so both of these aspects require your time. And that's the main issue. It's just time. It's having the time to do both to the extent you want to.
Yeah, that is true, isn't it? There's so many different perceptions and perspectives on motherhood and career-driven women. Because I always hear, like, for example, senior leaders or the directors who are women tend to be the ones who are single or haven't had kids, or that kind of typical female alpha female vibe is the kind of stereotype of what we see. But I question whether it needs to be like that. Is there something that, in society that we can change, in industries that we can change, so that it's easier for women to get to those positions and yet still have a balanced life with family and with a partner? And so that's not just the typical, this is what an alpha female leader looks like type thing. So it's interesting that that's something that has impacted you, and it's impacted so many women, because I've been there as well in my career, to be like, right, I know I was thinking, right, I want to settle down and have kids at a certain age. So maybe I should start taking my foot off the pedal and just being like, right, let me ease off a little bit, because I don't want to work long hours if I have a family. I don't want to. I want to spend time with them. But then that's my perception, because it doesn't need to be like that. So it's just something that's been wired in through what I've heard and external resources, pretty much, like the people around me, the influences. So yeah, that's just a bit on my experiences. How did you actually turn that around? What did you do to overcome it?
I don't think I did. I don't think there is a black and white solution to this issue. In actual fact, my body forced me to overcome it. I suddenly couldn't cope mentally. And so I had to make a choice. I had to make a change. And I've now got a setup where I work part-time in architecture and part-time on my art business. So I'm boosting the sort of creative aspects for my stress levels. And an art business is more self-employed. So it when the time comes for family, I have more flexibility on my time, and I can do that maybe in more balance with the hours of my children's lives. But I don't think these issues are solely female. As things change and paternity leave becomes better.
Yes.
I've had this same conversation with my husband, where, because as you know, his paternity leave is relatively good.
Yes.
But then it's like, how much of that do you utilize? Because then you face the same issues. You face the time away from your career, the progression changes as well. There's still the same. It's not unique to the sex. It's the situation. It's who stays home. It's who looks after the children and that family life.
Yeah, it's just in a traditional sense. Obviously now I do agree paternity is getting a lot better. Many companies are kind of are going towards that, having a great kind of package for the father as well. But traditionally, in a traditional sense, back in the day, let's say, like this is only quite recent, right? That the dad can stay at home and get paid and have that time. But it's always been the mother. So I think that's where it's come from initially with the perception of, okay, it's going to be, yeah.
It's good for paternity leave to be good. And it's also very uncommon for fathers to utilize the paternity leave. So it's very much a female issue, but it's starting to transfer slightly into male issues as well.
Yeah, that's very true, isn't it? And in terms of your artwork, so you said part-time. So part-time artwork, part-time. So it's nice to know that you still enjoy elements of being an architect. So it wasn't that you didn't enjoy the role, right? It was just more the pressure of understanding, okay, well, I want to have a family. How is that possible?
No, I think the balance with the family aspect was more a trigger to how the anxiety came about. And then that phase of my life that then forced me to look at my life and work out exactly what I want in my balance. Because I've always said, I want to be an artist and an architect. I just never took the leap to do it. And then things got worse with the anxiety. And then the pandemic and lockdown allowed me to reassess this again. And I love architecture. I love the interaction between materials, how we can sculpt the urban environment around us. There's so much about architecture that I love. And it's essentially been the dominant thing in my life for how many years? Like 12 years now. And it's not something I want to walk away from. But I also know that I can't keep ignoring that I want to be an artist and I want to paint and I want to create. So I think for now, this is my perfect balance. I'm getting to do both things I love. And I've got to see how that works together and then see if this is a dynamic that's long term or if it actually shows me which thing needs to be the dominant element.
Yeah, it's so amazing that you've even been able to identify two areas which you enjoy and also start your own business in one. Because many people struggle to even find one thing that they enjoy. So they're in jobs that they don't enjoy, that they pretty much hate. Some people, I've heard it. So it's nice knowing that you found that passion and that you're really driven towards your goals. And that helps, right? When you're doing something you love, it doesn't feel like work. It's just an enjoyment every day.
100%. Like I could paint all hours under the sun and it would not feel like work at all. I love painting. And so I completely agree. And it is rare to find your passion and turn it into your career. So, and I'm hopefully making this transition with the help of brilliant people like yourself that can help me showcase this side and showcase my business and get to know other, as you say, fearless females.
There you go. Absolutely. So can you tell us what is next for you?
Next in regards to architecture or art or?
In yourself, what are you up to with your artwork? What are you up to with architecture? I know you're starting a role next week. What are your plans?
I am starting a new role in an architecture firm next week, and I'm really excited with that. They do some lovely work, so I'm quite excited to get to know my team and get involved. I'm also doing a campaign at the moment on Kickstarter for my artwork. So where you can commission different animal pieces, wildlife pieces through acrylic or watercolor studies, as well as jigsaws. So that's currently happening, and it's only got a couple more days before that completes. And so I'll be producing all the artworks for that campaign. And I've actually also been working on another project, which is quite close to my heart. It's actually artwork based around anxiety and mental health. And so when I started to transition out of the fog of the anxiety, I started to put a lot of my emotions down as illustrations to try and explain how I was feeling to my partner. He was always incredibly supportive, but it's not always the easiest thing to really understand the feelings behind anxiety and depression. And so I've got a collection of illustrations, but I want to collate stories from other people that suffer from mental illnesses and turn them into illustrations and turn these into a book, so that then you feel in a way that you're not alone. Because mental health can feel quite isolating. You can feel quite lonely in it. And to a degree, I felt quite ashamed by it, like it was an abnormal thing to be feeling like this, and I was failing because I was feeling like this.
Yeah.
So I want to produce artwork that helps others find that voice that they can't actually find at the moment. They might not be creative, so they might not be able to articulate it in the same manner. So
when are you going to be releasing that? That sounds incredible, by the way.
That should come in about a month or so. Okay,
so watch this space. And how can people find you and your artwork?
They can go to my website. So my art business is under Ruby Ray Design. So my website is just www.rubyraydesign.com. And then I'm also on Instagram under Ruby Ray Design. And I'm actually working at the moment with a humanities artwork company over in the US, where they're trying to bridge the gap between world issues through artwork and working with artists. So we're just working together on some of my pieces and how artwork can influence quite negative aspects in the world. So that's another element that should come through soon, and I can update you all when that's live.
Yeah, that would be so great. Please do. And I'll put the your website links and all the links in the show notes for the listeners to have a little look on.
Oh, so
that'd be really good. But thank you so much for joining me on this podcast today, Ruby. It's been so nice having you on.
No, thank you. And thank you for helping this shy, introverted person try and find the voice and speak. So no, thank you.
Thank you. You found your voice. You were great. Thank you so much for listening to the Fearless Females Voice podcast. Be sure to complete the free Fearless test, where you can discover how to increase your confidence, build your resilience and self-love. You can find this test on my website, which is www.fearlessfemales.me. And to connect with other like-minded females, make sure you join our Facebook group, which is called Fearless Females. Oh, and one last thing. I'd like you to do a massive favor for me. If you enjoyed this episode, then be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you.